At 11:40 p.m. on the 14th of April 1912, a lookout named Frederick Fleet rang a bell 3 times, dead ahead. He had less than 40 seconds to warn the bridge before 88,000 tons of steel, the largest moving object human beings had ever built, met an iceberg it never saw coming until it was almost too late to matter. Titanic was over 880 feet long, nearly 4 city blocks. She carried more than 2,200 people, industrialists, factory workers, newlyweds, immigrant families with everything they owned packed into a single trunk below deck. She had left Southampton 4 days earlier under a headline that followed her the entire crossing the Unsinkable ship on her first voyage. Already a legend before she'd proven anything at all. That night, the Atlantic was unusually still. Survivors would later describe the sea as glass, no wind, no swell, a flat black mirror stretching to the horizon under a sky thick with stars. Conditions that should have made a ship easier to navigate, instead made the danger harder to see. Icebergs are usually spotted by the white water breaking against their base. That night, there was no white water, no waves, nothing to catch the eye except a shape, darker than the darkness around it, rising directly in the ship's path. 10 miles away, the crew of another ship stopped dead in the same ice field for the night. You would watch distress flares light up that sky for over an hour. They never came to help. And 90 minutes after Titanic vanished beneath the water, a ship called the Carpathia would arrive to find only lifeboats and silence where 2,200 people had been. This is the story of what happened in between. Not just an iceberg on a calm night, but a chain of decisions made in a Belfast shipyard 5 years earlier, in a wireless room hours before, and on a nearby ship's bridge in the final minutes that all came together in exactly the wrong order, at exactly the wrong time, to sink the one ship the world had been told could not sink.
If you want to understand why disasters happen, not just what happened, hit subscribe now every week on Keel and Current. We go beneath the surface of history's greatest maritime stories. Now let's go back 5 years, to 1907, to a dinner party where the Titanic was born out of ego, not necessity. In 1907, the White Star Line was losing a very public war. Their rival, Cunard, had just launched 2 record-breaking liners, the Lusitania and the Mauretania, faster than anything else afloat, and the newspapers wouldn't let White Star forget it. White Star's chairman, Bruce Ismay, decided the answer wasn't speed, it was scale. If Cunard had the fastest ships on the Atlantic, White Star would build the largest and most luxurious ships the world had ever seen. Not 1, but 3. Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic, built side by side in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, by a workforce of over 15,000 men. Titanic took over 2 years to build and used more steel than any vessel in history up to that point. She was designed with 16 watertight compartments below the waterline, sealed by heavy doors that could be closed in seconds by a single switch on the bridge. Shipbuilding trade magazines wrote, almost casually, that she was practically unsinkable, a phrase that was never meant as a guarantee, but was repeated so often by the press and the public that it hardened into fact in people's minds before she ever left port. Here's what most people don't know, and what almost no one at White Star advertised. Those 16 watertight compartments didn't extend all the way up to the deck above. They were sealed at the bottom, like the individual cups of an ice cube tray, but open at the top. Flood enough compartments at once, and water wouldn't stay contained, it would simply rise high enough to spill over the internal walls, pouring from one compartment into the next, and the next, and the next. The ship's watertight design could survive any 2 compartments flooding completely, even 4 in the right combination. It was, by any standard of 1,000, 912 engineering, an extraordinary safety feature. What nobody accounted for was a wound that opened not 2 compartments, but 6 at once, a scenario the ship's own designers had never seriously modeled, because no iceberg had ever done it before.
On the 10th of April 1912, Titanic left Southampton, England, carrying over 2,200 passengers and crew. Captain Edward Smith, White Star's most senior and trusted captain, was meant to retire after this voyage. Titanic was to be his final command, a quiet, celebrated send-off after decades at sea. Among the passengers in first class, Isidor Strauss, co-owner of Macy's department store, and his wife Ida, married 41 years and rarely apart a single day since their wedding, returning home from a winter in Europe. Also aboard, John Jacob Astor, the fourth, one of the richest men alive, and hundreds of others whose names filled society pages on both sides of the Atlantic. Below them, in third class, were hundreds of emigrant families, many from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe, who had sold what little they owned for a ticket in steerage and a chance at a new life in America. Their accommodations were modest by first-class standards, but genuinely comfortable compared to earlier immigrant ships, another point of pride for White Star's marketing. The crossing itself was calm for 4 days. Passengers dined, danced in the first-class lounge, and admired the ship's famous grand staircase beneath its glass dome. Few passengers knew that a coal fire had actually been smoldering in one of the ship's bunkers since before she even left Southampton. A known, if not unusual, hazard on coal-powered ships of the era, and one the crew believed was under control. What should have worried them more arrived by wireless. Over the course of April 14th, 6 separate warnings came in from other ships in the area, each describing ice fields directly in Titanic's path. Most of these messages did reach the bridge. Officers noted them. Some were even posted for the captain to see. But Titanic's wireless operators were also busy that day, handling a backlog of private passenger telegrams, messages to family, to business partners, to friends back home, and at least one ice warning was set aside, unfinished, when the wireless equipment briefly broke down and needed repair. The ship's speed, meanwhile, never changed. She continued through the night, at nearly 22 knots, close to her maximum. Here's the part of this story most documentaries skip entirely. Roughly 10 miles from Titanic that night sat another ship, the SS Californian, under Captain Stanley Lord, stopped dead in the same ice field rather than risk sailing through it in the dark by most accounts. The responsible decision. Her radio operator, Cyril Evans, had been on duty most of the day, tried to warn Titanic directly by wireless earlier that evening, and was actually told by Titanic's overworked operator to stop transmitting, because he was interfering with the backlog of passenger messages being sent to Cape Race. Frustrated, Evans shut down his equipment and went to bed around 11:30 p.m., just 10 minutes before Titanic struck the iceberg. At the time, no maritime law yet required a ship's radio room to remain staffed around the clock, so Evans's decision, while it would haunt the historical record, broke no rule that existed that night. Around midnight, Californian's crew on deck began noticing white flares lighting up the sky in the direction of another ship's lights on the horizon. They saw at least 5, possibly 8 flares over the course of roughly an hour. Believing distress rockets would be red, not white, and unaware that Titanic was even in the area, the crew woke Captain Lord and reported what they'd seen. Lord, according to later testimony, looked toward the lights, acknowledged the flares, and went back to his cabin without ordering the wireless switched back on or the ship to get underway. When the full scale of what had happened became public, Californian and Captain Lord became a lasting controversy in maritime history. Later, official inquiries in both the United States and Britain concluded that Californian could very likely have reached Titanic in time to save most, if not nearly all, of the roughly 1,500 people who died in the water. Lord disputed this for the rest of his life. The debate over exactly how much blame belongs to one ship, sitting still in the dark, 10 miles from a sinking one, continues among historians to this day. At 11:40 p.m., Lookout Frederick Fleet spotted a dark shape rising out of the haze less than a quarter mile ahead. No binoculars had been issued to the crow's nest, That voyage a supply oversight from the ship's last port call in Southampton, where the key to the locker holding them had reportedly been given to the wrong crew member during a last-minute staffing change. Fleet rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge with 4 words: "Iceberg, right ahead." First Officer William Murdoch, the officer on watch, gave the order to turn the ship hard to port and reverse the engines, a maneuver meant to swing the bow away from the ice. For 37 seconds, Titanic's massive rudder fought to answer the wheel. At her speed and size, it wasn't enough time. The iceberg didn't punch a hole through the hull the way it's often shown in film. It scraped along the starboard side for roughly 7 seconds, buckling steel plates and popping rivets in a broken line stretching nearly 300 feet, opening the hull like a seam rather than a puncture. 6 of the 16 watertight compartments began taking on water immediately. The ship's own designer, Thomas Andrews, was aboard for the voyage as part of the Harland and Wolff Guarantee Group. Called from his cabin to inspect the damage personally, within 20 minutes of the collision, he did the math in his head, standing in the flooding mailroom, and told Captain Smith directly. The ship had, at most, an hour and a half, perhaps 2 hours, before she went down. Titanic's wireless operator, Jack Phillips, sent the distress signal CQD at 12:15 a.m. and later, at a colleague's suggestion, the newer international distress code SOS, one of the first documented uses of it in a genuine emergency. Both signals carried Titanic's position out into the dark, reaching several ships across dozens of miles. Only one, Carpathia, was close enough and willing to turn and run at full speed through the same ice field that had just sunk the largest ship in the world to reach her. The next 2 hours are some of the most documented and most misunderstood in maritime history. If you want to see the next disaster we break down this deep, stay subscribed. We're covering the Costa Concordia next, a modern disaster with an unsettling number of the same mistakes made over a century later. Now, at 12:05 a.m., the order finally comes to uncover the lifeboats. The lifeboats were lowered badly underfilled. Crews, trained under the old assumption that the boats might buckle or jam in their davits under full weight, launched many carrying only half their rated capacity. Boat number 1 left with just 12 people aboard, in a boat built to hold 40. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, overseeing loading on the port side, enforced a strict women and children only policy, turning away husbands and fathers even when boats had empty seats remaining. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch allowed some men to board if no women or children were waiting nearby, a small, unofficial difference between 2 sides of the same deck that determined who lived and who didn't. The ship's 8-member band, led by violinist Wallace Hartley, continued playing on deck as the bow sank lower. Survivors disagreed for decades about the final song, but most agreed on one detail: the musicians never stopped, not because anyone ordered them to keep calm, but because playing was simply the job they knew how to do, and no one ever told them to stop. When officers reached the boat where Isidore and Ida Strauss stood, they offered Isidore a seat, an elderly, prominent man, alone. He refused, insisting he wouldn't take a place while women and children remained aboard. Ida was then offered a seat as his wife. She refused as well, reportedly telling him, "We have been together for many years. Where you go, I go." She gave her fur coat to her maid, helped her into the lifeboat instead, and stayed on deck beside her husband. They were last seen seated together in deck chairs, holding hands as the water rose around them. By 2 a.m., the bow was fully submerged, and the stern rose into the air at an angle survivors said they'd never seen anything like, the ship's structure groaning under stress it was never built to bear. Around 2:20 a.m., Titanic broke apart between the 3rd and 4th funnels. The water that night measured roughly 28 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that most people lost consciousness within 15 to 30 minutes. Of the nearly 1,500 who went into the ocean, only a small handful were pulled out alive. Carpathia arrived just before 4 a.m., roughly 90 minutes after Titanic sank, and recovered 705 survivors from 20 scattered lifeboats. Titanic's sinking rewrote maritime law within 2 years. The first international convention for the safety of life at sea, still the foundation of maritime safety regulation today, mandated that every ship carry enough lifeboats for every person aboard, that ships maintain 24-hour radio watch with no exceptions, and that an international ice patrol monitor the North Atlantic shipping lanes for dangerous ice, a patrol that still operates every single winter, nearly a century and a half later. Built specifically so no ship would ever again pass unwarned through the waters that sank her. It would take 73 years before anyone found her. In 1985, oceanographer Robert Ballard located the wreck using a submersible and towed camera sled, resting in 2 main sections over 2 miles below the surface, nearly 1,300 feet apart, proof, finally, of exactly how violently she had torn herself in half on the way down. Bruce Ismay, the chairman who pushed for size over speed and who survived the sinking by boarding one of the last lifeboats, spent the rest of his life largely out of public view, widely blamed in the press for both the ship's design compromises and his own survival. Captain Stanley, Lord of the Californian, spent decades trying and failing to clear his name. Second Officer Lightoller, who enforced the strictest evacuation policy on deck, went on to serve in both world wars and personally rescued British soldiers from Dunkirk in 1940 aboard his own small boat. A footnote. Almost no one connects back to that night in 1912. Somewhere in the ship's final radio logs is a distress call that a nearby ship's crew watched light up the sky and chose not to answer. And somewhere in a lifeboat that night sat a woman who had every seat in the world offered to her and chose the ship instead, because the alternative was a life without the person beside her. The ocean didn't sink the Titanic alone. People did one decision at a time, in a shipyard, in a wireless room, on a nearby bridge. And it only takes one ship, watching the wrong flare, to remind you exactly how close Unsinkable really was to the truth. If you want to understand the next disaster where human decisions mattered more than the disaster itself, subscribe to Keel and Current. I'll see you in the next one.